I was crossing a narrow pedestrian bridge, lost in thought about what gift to get for my friend Ryan. He had finally found his soulmate and was gearing up for marriage. We had been pals since our army days, and now he had invited me to be his best man. Having been married for quite a while myself, I was happy to see him settling down. I met my wife Lila under pretty unique circumstances at the hospital after my accident. She was the nurse on duty who took care of me during the day shifts. Her kindness towards me and all the patients was remarkable, but when she walked into my room, I sensed an undeniable mutual attraction. Her angelic voice caught my attention the moment I woke up to find her beside me, asking how I was feeling. I spent a few days in the hospital, and when it was time for my discharge, I mustered the courage to invite her out for coffee. After discovering she was single and not seeing anyone, I knew I couldn't let this opportunity slip by. We dated for about a year before tying the knot, and now, having built a family of my own, I was genuinely thrilled for Ryan as he opened his heart to someone who would fill his life with love and care. I knew all of Ryan's interests and hobbies, but I wanted to gift him something that would not only represent our friendship, but also symbolize his upcoming marital happiness and inspire a bright future together. I paused in the middle of the bridge, leaned on the railing, and gazed thoughtfully at the rippling water below. In the river, I caught a glimpse of my own reflection alongside the sky, scattered clouds, and birds flying in flocks above the park beneath me. After a few minutes of contemplation, my phone rang, snapping me back to reality. It was Travis, my partner from the force, letting me know we were being called to a crime scene. A girl had been murdered, discovered in her apartment by her roommate. What in the world happened here? I wondered aloud as I entered the apartment, immediately spotting my partner, Evan Carter. Several experts in protective suits were already busy gathering evidence, while Evan examined the crime scene for any clues. As I stepped into the apartment, a familiar stench of decay hit me, mingled with the unexpected scent of lavender. The body was in the bedroom, a young woman lying face up, a delicate silk scarf wrapped around her throat, the cause of strangulation. Bloodstains marred the bed to her right, and I noticed a cleanly cut rectangular patch of skin missing from her forearm. "Looks like we have ourselves a serial killer," Evan remarked, shaking his head. He had already spoken with a neighbor who revealed that the victim was a prostitute, often bringing clients home. She had a lotus tattoo on her arm. "So, no leads again?" I asked, frustration creeping in. "Nobody saw who came in?" Evan confirmed that the neighbor, a peeping Tom who usually spied on her roommate's visitors, was at a friend's house last night. She mentioned that the murdered woman was supposed to repay her today, but when she knocked and received no answer, all she could hear was a little dog barking. "What kind of dog does she have?" I inquired. "Oh, you should have seen it. It's a tiny little thing dressed up in a suit. Just the name of a dog, I guess," Evan replied. "Did forensics find anything yet?" I asked. "Fingerprints? There are tons of them. She's been bringing different men home. This is the fourth unsolved case linked to a serial killer we've been tracking, who we've nicknamed the Collector. He cuts out pieces of skin with tattoos from each of his victims, targeting girls of easy virtue. Most were found in hotels, with one discovered near the park, but this is the first victim we've located in her own home. The MO is consistent. He works meticulously, leaving no traces behind. The files for the 3 previous victims were still on our desk, and we hadn't found a single clue to suggest who this monster might be. We stayed in the apartment a while longer, completing our tasks. Once we wrapped things up, we headed to the station, knowing paperwork awaited us. I got home later than usual, and Lila was waiting for me, ready for dinner. "Hey, sweetie, how was your day?" she asked with concern. "They found the girl with the lotus tattoo again," I replied, my voice heavy with frustration. "Oh my God, that's such a scumbag. But don't worry, honey. You'll catch him. You always catch killers," she reassured me. But I couldn't shake the weight of the case. This was the 4th victim, and despite our best efforts, we still had no leads. Lila wrapped her arm around me, giving me a comforting squeeze. "Come on, let me heat up dinner for you." She offered her support as we continued to search for this killer. I reminded Lila to be extra cautious, but she insisted she was always careful and didn't fit the profile of the maniac's victims. "I don't have any tattoos, and I'm not like those girls, so I'm not his type," she reassured me. Still, I made her carry pepper spray for self-defense, and even suggested she take a gun, but she refused, saying she wasn't comfortable with firearms. Despite her confidence, I couldn't shake the worry I felt for her. Lila kept working at the hospital where we first met, driving her car there each day. I knew there were cameras in the hospital garage and that a few security guards patrolled the premises, which eased my mind a little. I was relieved that she always worked the day shift and got home before dark. As the weekend approached, I remembered Ryan's wedding was on the horizon, and I still hadn't bought him a gift. While my partner and I were on patrol, I spotted a small gift shop. "Hang on, stop right there. I need to grab something," I said. Without hesitation, my partner pulled over, so I rushed into the store, hoping to find something special. I wandered through the aisles for a few minutes, scanning the various souvenirs but struggling to make a decision. "Can I help you?" a salesman asked quietly as he approached me from behind. "Yes, a friend of mine from the army is getting married, and I'd like to get him something memorable," I replied. The salesman pondered for half a minute, then motioned for me to follow him. He pulled a statue of two small bears holding a hawthorn branch from the shelf behind the counter. "I think this is just what you need," he said, explaining its significance while wishing me happiness for my friend's future. He wrapped the statue in a small bag, and I hurried back to the car, where my partner was already shouting at me. Not far from us, a fight had broken out, and we were called to respond since we were the closest unit. "So, what did you get?" Evan asked as he flipped on the siren and sped off. "Oh, just a little something for my friend getting married." I pulled the statue from the bag to show him. "Very nice," he remarked, glancing back at the road. When we arrived at the scene, it turned out to be a scuffle between some boys over a girl. Unfortunately, one of them had managed to stab the other with a small penknife. The victim's girlfriend had called the police, and we got there just in time. The wound wasn't deep at all. I'd call it more of a scratch, but we took both guys to the station for questioning and bandaged the cut on the victim's arm. I enjoyed a productive day at work, and when the celebration day finally arrived, I hoped nothing serious would interfere with the festivities. I had asked the chief and my partner to replace me that day in case we were needed for any calls. They were supportive and wished me a great celebration. The wedding day dawned bright and warm, with a gentle breeze refreshing the air. Ryan's bride, Maya, looked like a princess straight out of a fairy tale. After the heartfelt speeches at the altar, I returned to my seat beside Lila as the newlyweds took their place at the head table. "She's so beautiful," Lila remarked, her jealousy barely concealed. "Yeah, I'm really glad he chose her," I replied, feeling my wife's gaze. "But I still think you're the prettiest," I added quickly. "Oh, you're just buttering me up," she teased, leaning in to kiss me. The gala unfolded splendidly, with guests celebrating joyfully. Ryan loved my gift. He hugged me tightly and gave me a friendly pat on the shoulder. "Well, Ryan, goodbye singlehood, and welcome to married life," I declared, and he smiled, replying, "Thank you, Ethan." As evening fell, Lila and I were getting ready to head home after exchanging polite goodbyes. I hadn't had much to drink at the party, just a little to stay within my limit, so I felt confident behind the wheel. Lila, on the other hand, had decided to indulge a bit and was pleasantly tipsy, with a nice buzz in her head, especially since she had a day off tomorrow. We made it home without any issues, but as soon as we stepped out of the car, she started clinging to me, trying to coax me into bed. We always enjoyed a lively sex life. I had always appreciated how she took care of me in bed, and this night was no different. But just as we finished, my cell phone beeped. "Who the hell is that?" I grumbled lazily, reaching for the phone that vibrated on the nightstand. I checked to see who was bothering me at this hour. It was Doug. "Yeah, what's up?" I asked, my voice thick with fatigue. "You're not going to believe this," he replied. "It's our collector again. Doesn't he have a day off?" I cursed again, feeling frustrated. "Okay, I'll be right there. Where is it?" "I'll send you the address," he said. I turned to Lila, apologizing, and kissed her before jumping out of bed to throw on my pants. I arrived at the address, a hotel on the outskirts of town. The room where the girl had been found was close to the manager's office. He testified that he thought he heard suspicious shouting, but didn't check immediately because it was clear the girl who had rented the room wasn't alone. Still, he had his doubts and eventually decided to take a look. When he peered through the curtains, he saw the dead girl. Blood splattered around her, All I could spot was an old gray Ford with no license plate. Unfortunately, the manager added, that doesn't help much. Looks like we're back at a dead end. I returned to my partner. Looks like it, I said. But Evan noticed something and moved closer to the bed with the body. He bent down, pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and reached to the foot of the bed, retrieving a small mother-of-pearl button. I think there's something here this time, he said, examining the girl's clothing and not seeing any similar buttons. Tell me, he said, turning to the manager, when was the last time this room was cleaned? We clean the rooms every time visitors leave, the manager replied. So we finally have a lead, Evan declared. Are you serious? A button? I asked, looking at him, slightly skeptical. Yes, it's just a button, but if you look closely enough, it might lead us somewhere. It looks like the girl managed to rip it off her assailant's clothes, and we'll get it on file. We lingered at the crime scene for a while longer, and when I got home, Lila was sound asleep. The next day, even though it was Sunday, I had to head into the station. Our experts did a thorough job, digging up samples of clothes that matched the buttons we found. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough. Many of the women's clothes had been discarded, but we still had several possibilities to consider. We discussed various theories and options for quite some time, but didn't come to any concrete conclusions. When I finally got home, I noticed Lila wasn't there. I dialed her number. Hello, honey, where are you? A friend called and asked me to come over, she replied. Why? Oh, nothing. We were supposed to go to that restaurant tonight. I didn't forget, but I got called into work, and I didn't know if you'd be back in time. Usually you're always late, and our plans just end up being plans. I'm sorry, honey, but you know how my job is. But I'm home now, so come back, and we can go out for lunch. Okay, I'll be right there, she said. I stayed home to wait for my wife. We didn't often get to go out together since I was sometimes called into work unexpectedly, but I loved my job and enjoyed keeping order in the city. Lila understood that and usually didn't mind. While I waited, I turned on the TV in the living room to distract myself a bit, but I didn't see anything interesting or new. I headed to my office to ponder the case, surrounded by the papers piled high on my desk. Lila arrived late, and I glanced at the clock, feeling a twinge of annoyance. I called her several times, but she didn't pick up. My worry crept in as I remembered that I had installed a tracking app on her phone. Turning it on, I saw she was downtown and heading toward our neighborhood. Well, if you're on your way, why aren't you picking up your phone? I muttered to myself. After a while, she finally walked through the door. Where have you been? I pounced on her with questions. I told you I was with friends, she replied, sounding slightly defensive. What's got you so worked up? Because you're late, I shot back, frustration bubbling over. Really? Am I going to miss our date at the restaurant for once? She said, sarcasm lacing her words. I was worried. Why didn't you pick up? I called you a few more times. I must have put it on mute, she said, nervously throwing her purse on the table in the hallway before hanging up her jacket. My stomach grumbled, begging for food. Lila hadn't cooked anything since we were supposed to go out to lunch this morning, so I decided to order pizza. You don't mind if we have pizza today, do you? Go ahead and order it. I wouldn't mind. I did eat at my friend's place, though. She treated me, she replied, sounding distant. I placed the order, knowing it would arrive soon. I was hungrier than ever. Returning to the living room, I found Lila wandering into the kitchen, and soon I heard the clattering of dishes as she prepared something for dinner. I noticed she seemed a little off. At first, I wanted to ask what was wrong, but the look on her face told me she wasn't in the mood to share. Over time, I had learned her personality and habits, but sometimes she managed to keep little secrets from me, usually when she was planning a surprise. Today, however, she was moving around the kitchen silently, as if she was up to something again. After waiting for the pizza to arrive, I made myself comfortable on the couch and began devouring it, calling Lila over. She refused for the moment, so I dug in and polished off half the pizza. An animal program I loved started on TV, and it complemented my meal perfectly. When Lila finally came into the room and sat down next to me, she seemed troubled. Would you like a slice? I offered, handing her the box. No, I don't want one, she replied, avoiding eye contact. I put the box on the table and sat close to her. Just as I finished chewing another piece, I said, Honey, is something wrong? I can tell you're worried about something. No, I'm fine. It's just, a friend of mine is in trouble, And I'm worried about her. Oh, you're just feeling sad. I'm sure she'll be fine. What kind of problems is it? I'm sorry, but I can't tell you. It's woman's business. All right, suit yourself, I said, taking another slice of pizza, knowing it would hit the spot. I continued eating while Lila sat next to me, staring at the TV, which was now showing predatory animals hunting their prey. For a while, we sat in silence, occasionally exchanging a few phrases. Watching my wife's sad demeanor made me feel sorry for her. She was so worried about her friend, and it was affecting her mood. I would have loved to help her, but I knew she wouldn't open up. After a while, her cell phone rang. When she glanced at the number, she walked out of the living room, clearly not wanting me to overhear her conversation. Who was that? I asked when she returned. It was a friend. I told you she's in trouble. The next few days passed by as usual, but the tension in our home lingered like a thick fog. Life settled into a routine. Me at my job, Lila at hers, evenings at home together. But everything changed one day when my partner and I were assigned to another hit-and-run case. We responded to the call as we always did, but this time the scene was chaotic. Two gangs had clashed, shooting at each other in a back alley. A few more patrol cars had managed to get there, but it was still a tense situation. We watched for a while, waiting for the right moment to intervene. I think I can get to the back of that one, Evan said confidently, pointing to a man who looked like the gang leader. Even our undercover officers, the fake cop girls we disguised with temporary tattoos, couldn't track down the suspect we needed. It was as if he could sense who he was targeting, always slipping away before we could catch him. Our last victim was found in the park late at night, close to midnight. Normally, the park was deserted at that hour, but luck was on our side. We had a witness. A drunken homeless man claimed he saw a tall, thin man in a dark jacket assaulting the girl. He was on top of her, and I saw him stick something in her side, the homeless man slurred. Even after she struggled, he didn't stop. Then he leaned over her and cut a piece of skin off her back. I didn't want to get killed too, so I hightailed it out of there and found the first decent-looking person I could to call the cops. That's something, I said, trying to suppress my frustration. What exactly do you mean? My hefty partner asked, scratching his head. Now we have something to go on. We need to track down every trauma center that reports an injury like that, I replied, feeling a flicker of hope. You seriously think he's going to go to a hospital knowing he's wanted? He shot back, raising an eyebrow. I looked at him, considering his point. You know I wouldn't do that if I were him. It would get him caught right away. Maybe he was right, but just in case, we kept an eye on the hospitals. So far, no one had come in with a wound like that. The next day, there was one similar case. A guy had gotten into a spat over a meal and stabbed his friend in the side with a fork. Several witnesses confirmed it wasn't our guy. It seemed our suspect had decided to keep a low profile, but I was convinced he knew a thing or two about medicine, or at least how to treat a wound at home. I shared my thoughts with Lila that evening. I usually didn't hide anything from her unless it was necessary for work, and I only shared the basics to keep her from worrying. The next day, I decided to visit Evan again. As I approached his room, I heard Lila's voice, gentle and soothing, the same tone she had once used with me. A wave of jealousy hit me, but I brushed it off. It was probably just my imagination. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she had been pulling away emotionally. She attributed it to her friend's problems, but I knew it was more complicated than that. Without knocking, I entered the room. Lila turned, surprised to see me. Oh, Ethan, we were just talking about you, she said, a hint of panic flashing across her face. Hey, Doug, how are you? I greeted, walking up to him and pretending I hadn't heard Lila. Yeah, as you can see, I'm anxious to get back to work soon, Evan replied, a smile creeping onto his face. Your wife is an angel, Evan said, looking at me. She's so caring. I can see why you married her. She doesn't just give you bandages. It's like she heals you with her words. I tried to hide my feelings of jealousy, but it was tough. After visiting Doug, I felt more conflicted than ever. Later that afternoon, Lila and I decided to go home together after she finished her shift. As she cooked dinner, my mind was consumed by the recent developments in our relationship. I couldn't stand it anymore. Lila, I said, stepping into the kitchen, there's something I need to hear from you. Yes, sweetheart, she replied, her voice as soothing as ever. I realize we both have hard jobs, but it's never stopped us before. I don't understand you, I began, trying to keep my tone calm. What do you mean, she asked, stirring the gravy in the pot. I can see that you're a little distant from me. I can feel it. And don't tell me it's about your friend. I wouldn't believe it. What are you talking about? What do you mean distant? She said, taking the pot off the stove. Confusion etched on her face. I just feel it, I admitted, my heart racing. She paused, looking at me with a mix of concern and surprise. I didn't realize you felt that way. Things have been stressful lately with everything going on. I know, but we need to talk about it, I urged, hoping to bridge the growing gap between us. I just feel overwhelmed, she confessed, her voice softening. With work and my friends' issues, it's been a lot. I get that, I replied, trying to maintain my composure. But I need you to let me in. I want to help you, Lila. She looked down, her brow furrowed. I just don't want to burden you with my problems. You have enough on your plate. It's not a burden if we're in this together, I insisted, stepping closer. Lila sighed, clearly torn. I'll try. I really will. I hope that was enough, but deep down, I knew we were facing challenges that went beyond just our jobs or her friend's troubles. The tension between us was palpable, and I feared we were drifting further apart. Between us, there's no longer the same affection we used to share. Tell me honestly, is there someone else? My voice was a tight whisper, laden with the weight of suspicion. What are you, delirious? Lila shot back, her eyes narrowing. I heard you talking to Evan today. Is that him? Are you having an affair with him? Are you out of your mind, I countered, struggling to maintain my composure. He's your friend. He's not just my partner. Besides, how could you think that about me? I could hear a hint of anger in her voice, or maybe it was just my stress manifesting itself. Every time we found a new victim with a cut piece of skin, I felt like I was chasing shadows. The pressure of our situation, combined with my unfounded doubts, made me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. I'm sorry, you're probably right, I conceded, trying to make amends. But Lila was still offended. Dinner passed in silence, and when we went to bed, she turned her back to me, wrapping herself tightly in the blanket. It was clear I wouldn't be getting any intimacy that night. How could I have even thought that about my partner? But I had heard stories about infidelity creeping into even the most reliable marriages. I'd watched countless programs on life stories with Lila on TV, and the images replayed in my mind. A jumble of thoughts and worries swirled in my head, especially with the murderer still at large. As time went on, I started to pay more attention to Lila, not in a stalking sense, but I began to listen closely to her phone conversations. I found myself visiting the hospital more often under the pretext of checking on Doug, all the while observing how Lila interacted with others. But so far, I had found nothing to confirm my suspicions. I even felt guilty toward Evan for harboring these thoughts about him. He was soon discharged from the hospital and was thrilled to return to work. We were put on the same case again, but my jealousy lingered like a dark cloud. I found myself watching him closely, even though Evan wasn't guilty of anything other than receiving medical care from my wife. Why are you so sad? Evan asked one day as we patrolled the streets. No reason. It's nothing serious. Just sad that we haven't caught the bastard yet, I lied, forcing a smile. The next weekend, Lila started going out again. How far? I asked, trying to sound casual. To a friend's house. I'll try not to take too long. Dinner's in the fridge if you need it. Just warm it up. She pecked me on the cheek and headed out. I couldn't shake the feeling that every time she went to her friend's house, she dressed more attractively. Lila had always been the kind of woman who looked flawless, even in a simple house dress. But this time, I noticed her deliberate efforts to look her best. As I watched her leave, the scent of her expensive perfume lingered in the air, a fragrance she only wore for special occasions. The thought nagged at me, and I sank onto the couch in the living room, my mind racing. Then I remembered the app on her phone. I turned it on and saw a small red dot moving along a line toward a distant part of town. After about half an hour it stopped. Jealousy began to rear its ugly head again. I decided to call her, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, repeatedly, glancing at the app to see that she hadn't moved from her last location, The idea crossed my mind that she might have fallen into the hands of the very maniac we were chasing. Panic surged through me as I dialed Doug's number, explaining my concerns. I gave him her location and asked him to wait for me if he arrived first. He agreed, and without wasting another minute, I drove to the address indicated on the screen. When I pulled up, Evan was already there, having arrived just a couple of minutes before me. The house loomed ahead, private and isolated, with the neighboring homes sitting a distance away. My partner and I approached the door quietly, weapons drawn. I hit the door with enough force to swing it open, adrenaline pumping through my veins as I prepared for whatever lay ahead. "Lila!" I shouted, hoping against hope that she was safe. Inside, the silence was deafening, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were about to confront something terrible. We broke in, pistols raised, scanning the dimly lit room for any signs of danger. The bottom floor was empty, but I could hear noises coming from upstairs. I signaled to Doug, and we ascended the stairs, weapons at the ready. The second floor was sparsely furnished, dominated by a large living area with a leather sofa, two oversized armchairs, a table, and a few decorative plants. There were only two doors, almost side by side. We opened the first one, revealing just a small closet. Without hesitation, we rushed to the second door. I kicked it open, and what I saw inside hit me like a freight train. The room was adorned with a large bed, and there, entwined in an embrace, was my Lila, making love to another man. My heart sank. I recognized him immediately. It was the chief surgeon from the adjacent ward. But the sight of Lila was even more shocking. She was dressed in a leather suit, no ordinary suit, but one pieced together from segments of leather, each adorned with tattoos depicting our victims. I staggered, frozen in disbelief, my gun still aimed at them. Lila only covered herself with a blanket when she saw me, but I couldn't shake the sight of the scar on her lover's side, a wound that hadn't fully healed. "You bastard!" I yelled, anger bubbling to the surface. "Doug, tie him up!" Doug, a skilled martial artist since childhood, wasted no time subduing the scarred man. Meanwhile, I kept my focus on Lila, still pinned to the bed, her unusual attire a stark reminder of the betrayal. "What is this?" I demanded, struggling to contain my rage. "What are you wearing? You're a—" She simply stared at me, silent, as if trying to comprehend the situation. I called for backup, my heart racing. When the police arrived, they conducted a thorough search of the house. In the basement, they uncovered a disturbing room with small tubs and solutions where the surgeon had soaked pieces of skin to preserve them, ensuring they wouldn't deteriorate. In his closet, they also found a dark jacket, one mother-of-pearl button missing, stained with blood. We later confirmed it belonged to all the victims. After securing both Lila and the surgeon, we took them to the station for interrogation. After a long, grueling session, Lila admitted that she had been seeing him for months. But it was her final revelation that shattered me. She knew exactly what her suit was made of, and chillingly, she liked it. She never explained her behavior, leaving me in a fog of confusion and heartbreak. It wasn't until I conducted further investigations that I discovered a family history of schizophrenia on both sides. In the end, they both faced justice. Lila was charged as an accessory, while the surgeon was the primary suspect in all those gruesome murders. After the trial, he was sentenced to death, while my wife, deemed mentally unstable after a psychiatric evaluation, was given a lengthy sentence in a women's prison designed for especially dangerous criminals. As I left the courthouse, I felt a sense of emptiness wash over me. The life I had known, the love I thought was real, had disintegrated into something unrecognizable. My partner Evan had stood by me through the ordeal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I would never fully recover from the betrayal. The scars ran deeper than the skin. This wound was etched into my very soul,